You know where it's at. So this is the Fold 7. I was able to kind of get it and find a picture here where it's just better preview here. So you can see from the edge, right? It's first the frame of it, and then the bezel here, which is the black marks on each side. And then from the bezel, just from the screen to screen. So if this is the Fold 7, this is the same as you would have from the iPhone 17 Pro. Not that, I think that's with a 6.3 inch, and the iPhone 17 Pro is this one. Now the iPhone 17 Pro Max, the Max is the bigger one, the Ultra, that's 6.9. So see if you can kind of compare it. The width, it's more narrow. That's the way it is, and that's the largest it gets. And that's where yesterday I was at all day, is looking for if the Pixel 10 Pro Fold was about the same. Sure enough, went over there. And when they say 3-inch, because this is a 2.87, but that's from the frame to the frame, right? That's like the dimensions. But I was looking more of the screen, and the Pixel 10 Pro Fold, it was 3-inch. But that's not what I wanted to. The dimension is everything. That includes the bezel and the frame. Well, this part here is not the screen. So even if it's 2 millimeters, that 2 millimeters, it's like huge. It is, once you start using it, if you're used to it. Now, if you're coming from just the Pro or just the S25, and not the Ultra, but just the S25, or you're going from Pixel 10 and not or 10 Pro, and instead of the 10 Pro XL, which is the larger one, this is the same size, and you can kind of tell in this picture it's more narrow, and compared to that, it's the same size. So that's what you're looking at. Now, yes, it is taller. It's quite a bit taller, but the narrowness. So on the height, it can be even I'm fine with it. If it's that height, but it's really the width. That's why it makes it look more narrow. But it's actually the same size. So when we compare it, so remember that how narrow it is. So when you compare that to if you come somewhere from the bigger versions like the S25 Ultra or the Pro Max or the Google Pixel XL, the Google Pixel 10 XL, it would end up being something like this. Now, it is about the same height as tallness, but it's about a millimeter difference. This one's about a millimeter taller. But even with that, in the width, I know it's hard to tell because that's the way they customize it. This is the one that we saw compare next to the Fold 7, and this is the Pro Max. Now, I know it's hard to tell because that's the way they designed it from end to end. And you might say, oh, well, that's just 1.67 millimeters, right? That's not much of a difference. If you can tell, I'm trying to get into frame here on both sides. Versus this, you can kind of tell like from this, so we start right here. See where the A's at over here? And you might say, oh, well, it's just a little bit. Just kind of a, just from here to there. Just a little sliver here of 2 millimeters. How much can that do? And we'll end up going up here to the top, and you say, well, we'll try to line it up from these apps. And we'll say, yeah, it hits the battery here. And you say, oh, well, that's just a little sliver here, just that much. But if you're used to it and you go back to a narrow one, you can really tell the difference. And the reason why is because Samsung and iPhones and Pixels, they're really good with their software. So what they'll end up doing is these apps are actually smaller, and I don't know if you can tell. And you might see like, oh, well, that's just a little bit of difference, and the spacing. And so when you click on something here, and it'll pop up, the main thing that you're focusing on It'll, like, let's say it's the weather. It'll pop up the number. Oh, it's 6-7 degrees. And you go to the other one, it may be the same size. But that's the way they do it in order to make it seem so. Like if I showed you this here versus this here, you would say, oh, well, it's just a little sliver, like just 1/8 of an inch. What does that matter? Well, that 1.67, it does matter if you're used to the XLs, the Pro Maxes, the Ultras, because when you try to go back down, you can really tell how narrow it is, and it affects certain things because you're used to a bigger screen, so it affects just the way the layout is. And yes, you can do different things like upscale the text and do stuff like that, but it just kind of, you can tell that it's like you're losing that little, I think it's 7 or 8% off each millimeter, so it ends up being around 13 to 16% of area, and it may just seem like, well, it's just a little sliver. All it's added is from this edge here of the app to the end to the bezel. It's just that much. But when you're looking at photos and things like that, and if I could kind of do it here, if it was like this, you would say, oh, well, it's just that. And then when you could add that, you'd say, oh, it's just a little bit. It's just a little, half of a, of a fingernail. And it's not too much. Like putting two pennies together, stacking them. But the thickness of but really, if you're up to a larger version, or even a 6.9, and you might say, well, that's a millimeter difference, but it actually does, coming from something like this, a millimeter, you wouldn't be able to tell too much, and you may get, but when you're up at the 3 inches, and it's 90 something plus percent, once you go down of screen display, once you go down to like a 2.9 something, you're pretty much, you're going to be used to that. But something going down to something like a 2.8, 2.6, 2.7, the narrowness that you can't see unless you're actually physically there comparing it in person, using it, that little bit of millimeters, 2 millimeters, 1/8 of an inch, it really does make a difference. Just the text, the width, the apps are bigger. And a lot of times what I said in the software is they'll give you the number. So whatever your main focus is, it'll get bigger just because it'll match the same thing, but the text in the back will be smaller, and then really what it is, and so that's just the software, because they know what people, are looking for and stuff. But in different apps and different things, you could lose that. So you might say, like the Paul over here, oh, well, you wouldn't, this much would be covered up right here if I could do it, oh, well, what are you missing really? And if you go like this, it just kind of, I can't line it up here, but you know what I mean? And you might say, oh, well, that's nothing, right? Nothing. But you can really, in different apps, the way it lays out, sometimes, like if you were able to put on certain videos, like a hashtag or just any kind of letterbox here, some of it would be shift. Imagine this, you have a letter here, and you're starting, maybe you're not thinking starting from the edge, but somehow when it comes onto a smaller screen, it just changes the text layout. And so, you could have whatever letters here, and you may be gone when you're on a different display. And that's what happens sometimes too, where it's harder to tell. And you just miss more information. Also, everything kind of shrinks down. You can't tell on here, obviously, but I'm telling you, and because I'm trying to line it up, but like you can't tell. But in person, if you were here or you went to this picture, you could tell that these apps are smaller than these.